Welcome to the Four Witnesses of the Messiah, Chapter 4, Session 2B, Jesus Christ the Apostle, and this session is titled, Coming to the Mount. We are in Jesus' apostolic phase and his first Galilean itinerary. He was bringing new light, not only doctrinally, but practically. Jesus ministered and healed and worked miracles like no one had seen before. That also was new light. He was breaking new ground in the battle of good over evil. He had the Spirit without measure. He had everything available at that time, all the spiritual abilities demonstrated by the patriarchs and priests, prophets and judges and kings who had the Spirit upon them in the Old Testament, and he was showing the world. Wow, that certainly was light too. So our first event of this segment is event 4.6, the calling of more apostles. And we go to Matthew chapter 4 verse 18. Matthew 4:18. And Jesus, walking by the Sea of Galilee, saw two brethren, Simon called Peter, and Andrew his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishers. And he said unto them, Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. And straightway they left their nets and followed him. And going on from thence he saw other two brethren, James the son of Zebedee, and John his brother, in a ship with Zebedee their father, mending their nets. And he called them. And they immediately left the ship and their father and followed him. Mark 1:16 has the same record. Mark 1:16. Now as he walked by the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and Andrew, his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishers. And Jesus said unto them, Come ye after me, and I will make you to become fishers of men. And straightway they forsook their nets and followed him. And when he had gone a little further thence, he saw James the son of Zebedee, and John his brother, who also were in the ship mending their nets. And straightway he called them, and they left their father Zebedee in the ship with the hired servants and went after him. Now, this is the second time that the Gospels mentioned Andrew and Peter, chronologically. Andrew had come into Jesus' ministry way back on the first day after he had come back from the temptation. And Andrew had introduced Peter, his brother, to Jesus. Now, we can assume that they intermittently went back to their jobs as fishermen on the Sea of Galilee. Andrew had been attending John the Baptist meetings, so one could assume that after Andrew found out that Jesus was the Messiah, he became involved as a disciple in Jesus' group. Jesus' disciples had been to the wedding in Cana and seen the miracle there. When Jesus drove the merchants out of the temple at Passover, his disciples were there. They remembered the scripture, the zeal of thine house has eaten me up. They were required by law to attend the Passover, so Andrew and Peter would have been there. When Jesus went back to Galilee via Samaria, he had disciples with him then. So where would you be if you knew that Jesus was the Messiah? I think Andrew and Peter were there with him. Imagine what it would have been like to be a disciple, to hear him teach, to witness the miracles, to be a part of spiritual history in the making. But disciples have jobs and families too. So Andrew and Peter were occasionally back at their fishing job. But now their relationship with Jesus was about to become more formal. Jesus asked them to follow him. That invitation was a great honor. Jesus said, "Follow me." This was the invitation of a holy man. Institutions of higher learning, colleges and universities, were rare in ancient times. In Judah, the early Jewish schools of the prophets had died out when the sages replaced the prophets. In the rest of the world, there were the famous libraries, which had been sponsored by the royal and rich, and these functioned as centers of secular learning, but also the wise and learned became known for their abilities, and students would come to them and live with them and learn from them. To be invited to learn at the feet of one of them would be a great honor. Paul studied at the feet of Gamaliel, a renowned sage. This is what was offered when Jesus said, "Follow me." But it wasn't like the Pied Piper. Jesus probably said more than just "follow me." But the summary of the invitation was, follow him. All right? He had said, "Follow me" to Philip way back on the first days of his ministry, and probably to Nathanael as well. But here, on the seashore, Jesus extended that invitation to Andrew and Peter. Jesus said, "I will make you fishers of men." This is a beautiful figurative phrase, characteristic of Jesus. He was going to teach them to catch men, so to speak. All the activities of that allegory of fishing would come into play. The toil of the work, the difficult conditions at times, the use of a net, and the joy of the catch. Now, of course, every analogy can be carried too far. The people they caught were not killed or sold. But many a sermon's yarn has been spun elaborating upon this theme. Jesus was going to teach them to fish for men. There definitely are techniques to learn that work, and Jesus was the master of it. Earlier in John 3, it said that Jesus knew what was in man. Jesus was expert in the psychology of winning men. Modern books like Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People comes to mind. Jesus knew that stuff, and it was what he taught to his entourage, his students that followed him. He also taught by word and example, teach and show, doctrine and practice. But now it says that Andrew and Peter left their nets. Their net was their means to living. Fishermen did not have fields to grow crops to sustain them. All they had was their net and their boat. To forsake their net was a sign of commitment. Next, Jesus had encountered two more fishermen who would become apostles. They were John and James, the sons of Zebedee. Now, in another spot that says they were partners in business with Andrew and Peter. So this is probably not the first time that John and James had heard about Jesus. But he invited them to follow him as well. They probably had been attracted by Jesus' fame and begun to attend his teachings, but it is at this time that Jesus extends the invitation to follow him. And they forsook their nets and their father. Now there were two teams of brothers among the apostles, and they would rise up to be the top leaders of the church later. Event 4.7 is next. Event 4.7 is the teaching in Capernaum and the casting out of an unclean spirit. Mark chapter 1, verse 21. Mark 1:21. And they went into Capernaum, and straightway on the Sabbath day he entered into the synagogue and taught. And they were astonished at his doctrine, for he taught them as one that had authority, and not as the scribes. And there was in their synagogue a man with an unclean spirit, and he cried out, saying, Let us alone. What have we to do with thee, thou Jesus of Nazareth? Are you come to destroy us? I know thee who thou art, the Holy One of God. And Jesus rebuked him, saying, Shut up, and come out of him. And when the unclean spirit had torn him, and cried with a loud voice, he came out of him. And they were all amazed, insomuch that they questioned among themselves, saying, What thing is this? What new doctrine is this? For with authority commands he even the unclean spirits, and they do obey him. And immediately his fame spread abroad through all the regions round about Galilee. See, that was one of those instances of apostolic action. New light on how to do this. Luke chapter 4, verse 31 also talks about this incident. 4.7. And he came down to Capernaum, the city of Galilee, and taught them on the Sabbath days. And they were astonished at his doctrine, for his word was with power. And there was in the synagogue, there was a man in a spirit of unclean spirit, cried out with a loud voice, saying, Let us alone, what have we to do with thee, thou Jesus of Nazareth? Are you come to destroy us? I know thee who you are, the Holy One of God. And Jesus rebuked him, saying, Shut up, come out of him. And when the devil had thrown him in the midst, he came out of him, and heard him not. And they were all amazed, and spoke among themselves, saying, What word is this? For with authority and power he commands the unclean spirits, and they come out. The fame of him went out every place of the country round about. Now, it's kind of strange how certain things become traditions, like when dealing with devil spirits. Yeah, they do exist. Now, they're not the cause of everything. When believers do deal with him, it seems as though as things have fallen into some kind of a formulaic ritual, like speaking to them, I rebuke you in the name of Jesus Christ. What? Are we supposed to use magic words? I mean, don't tell them you're rebuking them. Rebuke them. What did Jesus say when it says he rebuked them? But did he say, I rebuke you in my name? No. He said, shut up and come out of him. So don't tell them that you're rebuking them. Rebuke them. I'd always wondered how Jesus could get those who were possessed to shut up. Everything they say is tainted. Everything they say is a sly attack. So why let any of it come out? Why let any of it persist? I finally realized that Jesus just did it by believing. In 1994, I wrote a white paper on God's absolute power over the spiritual realm. We'll give you a copy of it. That covers this subject from the Bible. That study is an example also of the significance and use of signpost words, those associated terms that occur in the same context as words that you're doing a word study on. That spirit cried out. There was something that hurt it. There was something it didn't like. And not just a little bit, but a whole lot. It didn't like it. Well, what in the heck was that? Do we have the power to do that? Well, if Jesus did, then we do too, because we have Christ in us. So, let's take a trip into this topic. Look at James chapter 2, verse 19. James chapter 2, verse 19. It says, "Thou believest there is one God. Well, you do well. The devils also believe and tremble." This clue in James was given to me by Reverend Clapp when we discussed this matter after we were given an assignment to study it at an advanced class special on discerning of spirits. The leader of the ministry had just given us the assignment and said, quote, "I want you research types to study if devil spirits can feel pain," unquote. And I was in the front row, and he was looking straight at me when he said it. And initially, I thought he was from Mars. I was thinking to myself, and shuffling through scripture after scripture in my mind, how are we supposed to know that? But I had recently discovered the signpost word technique, so I decided to try it out on this subject. And Reverend Clapp and I discussed it later that day, and he told me about James chapter 2. And actually, on that trip to that advanced class special, I had brought my Young's Concordance with me on the trip to the class. So I started working on it. And the next morning at 4:30 a.m., I awoke with a start. I sat up in bed and boom, I had a vision of what it was like. There is something that makes them so scared they tremble. The Greek word for tremble is phrisso, Phrisso, which is to get goose flesh, to make your hair stand up, to be so scared you tremble. Now, spirits don't have flesh or hair, but you can get this picture. There is something spiritual that affects them that way, and we can wield it by believing. And of course, there are some who poo-poo the existence of the demonic spirits. Well, if Jesus said they exist, then I'm going to agree with him. I'm not going to pick and choose which words of Jesus I will believe and which ones I won't. All right? But also, I'm not going to be so consumed by that subject that I think there's a devil spirit around every corner. You know, we're ambassadors of light. We let our light so shine. So we need to major on light, not darkness. You know, but Jesus had the Spirit without measure, you know, the good variety of the Spirit, and he imparted it to the 12 and to the 70 so they could do the works that he did. And they had authority over those spiritual forces as well. Well, woo-hoo! Look at Luke chapter 10. Luke chapter 10, verse 17. Luke 10:17. And the 70 returned again with joy, saying, Lord, even the devils are subject unto us through thy name. And that word subject in the Aramaic is in the fourth degree. In the fourth degree, they have good, they have better, they have best, and they have okay, that's the fourth degree. And so they're subjectively, absolutely subject. Wow, they am subject. So we ought to act like it, that we have that power. And he said unto them, Jesus said, I beheld Satan as lightning falling from heaven. Well, you bet. Behold, I've given you the power to tread on serpents and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall by any means hurt you. Then he gives some good advice. Notwithstanding, in this rejoice not that the spirits are subject unto you, but rather rejoice because your names are written in heaven. See, Jesus advised that we must keep our outlook and perspective correct. Don't go down that dark path and get filled with thinking about the dark realm all the time. We're children of light. Now, some people get too fascinated by the dark realm. Well, my answer to that is, how far up the devil's butt do we need to be in order to kick it? Just kick it. Some people want to study witchcraft and learn the terms, etc., so they think they can defeat them better. Well, I say baloney. God will show you what you need to know. So that's why I don't watch Harry Potter movies anymore. I change the channel. You ever wonder why they're one of those series that always seems to be on cable TV? Well, do you want your kids to grow up to be witches? Do you want them to say, I love magic? Enough said. In my white paper, I followed the terms trembling, shaking, earthquake, lightning, fire, all those signpost words that occurred together, and found where they clustered, and those passages opened up to me about the great power that God wields over the dark realm. We'll take a look at a few of these. Look at Job chapter 27. Job chapter 27. This is the portion of a wicked man with God, and the heritage of oppressors, which they shall receive of the Almighty. If his children be multiplied, it's for the sword, and his offspring shall not be satisfied with bread. Those that remain of him shall be buried in death, and his widows shall not weep. Though he heap up silver as the dust, and prepare raiment as the clay, he may prepare it, but the just shall put it on, and the innocent shall divide the silver. He builds his house as a moth, like winding layers of entanglement, and as a booth made of intertwined branches that the keeper makes. The rich man, speaking of the seed of the serpent people in context, the rich man shall lie down, die, but he shall not be gathered in the resurrection of the just. He opens his eyes, he's awakened for judgment at the other resurrection, and he is not. He dies the second death into perpetual oblivion. Terrors take hold on him as waters. A tempest, whirlwind, steals him away in the night. The dry east wind carries him away, and he departs, and as a storm hurls, buffets him out of his place. For God shall shoot at him. I wonder what he's going to shoot. And not spare. He would fain flee. Fleeing, he would flee out of his hand. And men shall clap their hands at him, and shall hiss him out of his place. Just like flushing an animal out of a thicket. Wow. That is vivid, isn't it? Well, that's how this works. Wow. That's how this works. Here's some more verses on this. Job chapter 26. Job chapter 26. Verse 3. Job is getting back at old Bildad. He says, how have you counseled him that has no wisdom? You haven't done that. You just accused me. And how have you plentifully declared the thing as it is? No, you've twisted the word up, Bildad. To whom hast thou uttered words? I'm Job. I'm a holy man of God. Whose spirit came from you, buddy? And then he answers what spirit it was. Verse 5. Job 26:5. Sunken spirits, dead things. That's devil spirits. Are caused to writhe in pain, from under the waters, even the inhabitants thereof. So Job was operating discerning of spirits. He knew Bildad was speaking for the false god. Then verse 6, hell, the grave, is naked before him, and destruction, the place of final destruction, has no covering. God knows what you're doing, Bildad. So then what's really something is Job lists the 5 containments for the adversary and the 5 effects that God has upon the dark realm. Verse 7, he stretches out the north over the empty place, and hangeth the earth upon nothing. He binds up the waters in his thick clouds, and the cloud is not rent under them. He blocks the personal attention of the adversary's throne by spreading his cloud upon it. He hath compassed the face of the waters with boundaries until day and night come to an end. Wow. These verses clearly describe 5 distinct forms of containment that believers can believe for when they walk for the true God. These are indicated by the 5 independent verbs ascribed to God: stretches out, hangs, binds up, holds back, and compasses. The first containment mentioned refers to what we now know as the great mystery, which was hidden until it was revealed to the Apostle Paul. The empty place is the empty portion of the northern sky near the Big Dipper, where the ancients had not designated any constellations. That represents the great mystery, and not knowing the mystery is the greatest limitation that the adversary had. Wow. The next containment is he hangeth the earth upon nothing. Satan cannot violate God's natural laws. The earth hangs in space by physical law. And so when Satan manifests a lying sign or wonder, he must do so within the confines of natural law. Man is bound by the same set of laws. Therefore, anything Satan could do, man could do scientifically if he knew how. So, Adam had that power, and he was a man. Now Satan uses the same and misuses it. The third containment is the prince of the world's cloudbursts of evil can be held back. This refers to Satan's angry storm-like rampages of evil, which if he had his way, he'd pummel us with like he did with Job. The evil waters, indicative of the spiritual realm, are bound and cannot break forth. God protects us from these with his hedge of protection. The fourth containment is that objects of the adversary's personal royal attention are blocked or obscured by God's cloud. Clouds are a covering, may indicate God's protection and concealment. So this is what they did in Exodus. The cloud protected them. So if you do a study of mists, clouds, you'll see this. The next form of containment is boundaries or barriers which God sets up to contain the spiritual realm. The erosive power of Satan's waters are encircled with a boundary. God defined that any encroachment of darkness is limited by light. Spiritual darkness must yield to the light of God's Word. Wherever and whenever the light of God's Word is spoken and believed, darkness goes. So then after that, the next section described 5 forms of God's awesome impact on the spiritual realm. And these are illuminated by His Word, His power, His understanding, His Spirit, and His hand. This is verses 11 through 14. The pillars of heaven, the highest ranking devils, tremble and are astonished. They're stunned. They're dumbfounded at His reproof. He stills the sea with His power, and by His understanding He smites through, shatters, pierces the proud, and that's the storm. By His Spirit He has clear skied the heavens. His hand hath formed or caused to writhe in pain the fleeing serpent. And then it says, lo, these are uttermost parts of His ways. Yeah, they're far out there. But how little a portion is heard of Him, because they're right at the verge of the spiritual realm. But the thunder of His power, who can understand? So those are the limitations and the effects of God on the spiritual realm, and we can work them by our believing. This passage is just amazing. Then the next one is Psalm 18. Turn to Psalm 18. Here's another place that expresses this awesome power that Jesus was unfolding before their eyes for the first time. It was apostolic in nature. They had never seen it like that. Psalm 18:1. I will love Thee, O Lord, my strength. The Lord is my rock, my fortress, my deliverer, my God, my strength, in whom I will trust, my buckler, and the horn of my salvation, and my high tower. Do you own all those things? You can. If you know the Word and believe, you can own them. They'll be yours, just like He said, they're mine. And He said, I will call upon the Lord, who is worthy to be praised. So shall I be saved from mine enemies. The sorrow of death compassed me about, and the floods of ungodly men made me afraid. The sorrows of hell compassed me about. The snares of death preceded me. In my distress I called upon the Lord. I cried unto my God, and He heard me. He heard my voice out of His temple, and my cry came before Him, even into His ears. And then the earth shook and trembled. The foundations of the hills moved and were shaken, 'cause He was pissed. Somebody's messing with my kids. And there went up a smoke out of His nostrils, and fire came out of His mouth. Coals were kindled by it. He bowed the heavens also, and came down, and darkness was under His feet. And He rode upon a cherub, and did fly, yea, He did soar upon the wings of the wind. He made darkness His secret place. His pavilion round about Him were dark waters of thick clouds of the skies. He set up His headquarters right smack dab in the middle of the adversary's business, and he couldn't do nothing about it. Wow. And now He gets to work in verse 12. At the flash that was before Him, through His thick clouds passed hailstones and coals of fire. The Lord also thundered in the heavens, and the highest gave His voice, hailstones and coals of fire. Yea, He sent out His arrows and scattered them. He shot out His lightnings and discomfited them. They were not very comfortable. Woo! And then the channels of the waters were seen, and the foundations of the world were discovered at Thy rebuke, O Lord, at the blast of the breath of Thy nostrils. That happens when we kick the adversary out of people. That is what makes them tremble. That is what gives them goose flesh. That's what makes their hair stand on end. Wow. Yeah. Look at verse 15. It says, then the channels of the waters were seen. What do channels do for waters? They're borders that the waters can't pass. And the foundations of the world were discovered at thy rebuke. What foundations are those? Those are the rules and regulations of the spiritual realm that the adversary cannot defeat. So, they were seen. Those waters were seen. Those foundations were discovered. It's like at night in the storm and in the violence, and then the lightning flashes, and for that moment, in the light, you can see it. When the light flashes, at that time of deliverance, those are learning moments. Those are moments that we see what we can do. And so, when the lightning flashes and we see the landscape in front of us, just for a moment, that teaches us these borders for the waters and the foundational rules and regulations of the cosmos. They were discovered at thy rebuke, O Lord, at the blast of the breath of thy nostrils. And he took me and delivered me from my strong enemy and from them that hated me, because they were too strong for me. They preceded me in the day of my calamity, but the Lord was my stay. And then he brought me forth also into a large place. He delivered me because he delighted in me. The Lord rewarded me according to my righteousness, according to the cleanness of my hands hath he recompensed me. Well, we're righteous because of what Jesus has done for us. Wow. So, that's Psalm 18. There are other passages in the Word that are just as vivid as that I describe in my white paper. And so, just like Jesus, when you confront the dark powers, it's supposed to be no sweat. It's not like Hollywood. It's like squishing bugs. Jesus didn't even let them speak. How? He just believed. God will show you. But when Jesus cast them out, something made them go. Well, hallelujah, sock it to you. Or them. Just ask God to show you. And then go out and get her done. That's the power that we've got. Wow. Next event, 4.8. Healing Peter's mother-in-law. The scripture here is Matthew 8:14. This is one of those sections that Matthew is not chronological. It's constructed on a different basis. But Mark and Luke are chronological. Luke is in order, it said, and then Mark trails right along with it. But here, Matthew 8, verse 14, when Jesus was come into Peter's house, he saw his wife's mother, his mother-in-law, laid sick of the fever, and touched her hand, and the fever left her, and she arose and ministered unto them. Mark 1:29. And forthwith, when they were come out of the synagogue, they entered into the house of Simon and Andrew with James and John. So they're disciples, they're following him now. But Simon's mother-in-law lay sick of a fever, and immediately they told him of her. And he came and took her by the hand and lifted her up, and immediately the fever left her, and she ministered to them. It's also in Luke 4, verse 38. And he arose out of the synagogue and entered into Simon's house. And Simon's mother-in-law was taken with a great fever, and they brought him for her. And he stood over her and rebuked the fever, and it left her, and immediately she arose and ministered to them. Well, just like we have that great power over the dark realm at our word, we have the same great power with healing. So demand it, just demand it. Jesus told his disciples how to do that in Mark 11. Look at Mark 11. Mark 11, verse 22. Mark 11, verse 22. And Jesus answering said to them, Have faith in God. Have the believing of God. Wow. For verily I say unto you, that whosoever, are you a whosoever? Yes, you are. Whosoever shall say unto this mountain, be thou removed, and be thou cast into the sea, and shall not doubt in his heart, but shall believe those things which he says shall come to pass, he shall have whatsoever he says. So you whosoevers can have whatsoever you say when you believe. Therefore I say unto you, what things soever you desire, when you pray, believe you already have received them, and you shall have them. You know, people come to us sometimes with the most horrendous needs. Well, don't be intimidated. Don't cower. Don't hesitate. Don't fear. Don't water down the word. Just speak it. Speak the word. Undiluted. Have the believing of God. You know, when Jesus spoke it, it happened. No sweat. All right? And God will show you how to do that so you can get her done. Next event, 4.9. 4.9. Now, see, when they entered into Peter's house to heal his mother-in-law, it was on the Sabbath. So here in event 4.9, it's after the Sabbath ended, there were more healings. Now, Dan Stalker has these verses in the same event as earlier. Michael Rood has it in a separate event because they started at evening at sunset. Like I said earlier, it was the Sabbath. So as soon as the people could travel, they came to Jesus. It was the next day. Now, I want to point out that just because I may differ with the placing of an event doesn't make the others evil or wrong or something. Because at the beginning of this class, I said that one of my criteria for designating separate events was chronologically, if it occurred on a different day, then I would make it a separate event. So that's why I'm making this 4.9. But Dan's work and Michael's work is wonderful. Their books are great and valuable. All right? They just use a different criteria for their events sometimes. So once we know the chronology, then we'll be able to make a lot of discovery, just like we did in the Old Testament history class. When we went through the prophets in the Old Testament history class, we went through them chronologically instead of canonically. So it's just that Dan's criteria was different for his events. He showed that it was a continuation of earlier action. It just extended past sunset into a new day. So Matthew 8:16, Matthew 8:16, when even was come, so now it's a new day, they brought unto him many that were possessed with devils, and he cast out the spirits with his word, and healed all that were sick. No sweat. All of them. Nobody was missed. That it might be fulfilled that which was spoken by Isaiah the prophet, saying, himself took our infirmities and bare our sicknesses. Wow. So, God even commemorates this with a spiritual firework of fulfilled prophecy. Wow, that was so cool spiritually. This was a spiritual milestone. The world had never seen it like this. The devil was learning there was a new boss in town. Well, let's walk like that. You know, today we're being inundated with movies and such about people with superpowers. You know, kids are dreaming of being able to wield superpowers like they're superheroes. Well, stop dreaming and start acting in the name of Jesus Christ. We can do super things now by the power of God. Just ask God to show you how. And then fasten your seatbelt, because he'll teach you. Whoa. Look at Mark chapter 1, verse 32 is another account of this event. 4.9. And at evening when the sun did set, they brought unto him all that were diseased, and them that were possessed with devils, and all the city was gathered together at the door. And he healed many that were sick of diverse diseases, and cast out many devils, and suffered not the devils to speak, because they knew him. Again, it wasn't Hollywood. Jesus didn't argue with the devil's spirits. He just didn't allow them to speak, period. Well, how do you do that? He just believed, and he told them to shut up. God will teach you. We can minister and change people's lives in 1 second. Well, get her done. Luke 4:40, another one. Luke 4:40 is another one on this event. Now, when the sun was setting, all they that had any sick with diverse diseases brought them unto him, and he laid his hands on every one of them and healed them. And devils also came out of many, crying out and saying, You're the Christ, the Son of God. And he rebuked them and allowed them not to speak, for they knew he was the Christ. Well, they knew he was the Christ. Well, do they know you yet? Now, it's the next morning, the next event. I think Dan has it as another event, I'm not sure. But this is the next morning, so I don't have it as the next event, because the Hebrew day begins at night. All right, so anyway, Dan and Michael do make it a separate event. Mark 1:35. Mark 1:35. And in the morning, rising up a great while before day, he went out and departed into a solitary place, and there prayed. Jesus was a man of prayer. It was important to him. If Jesus prayed, well, maybe we need to do that too. And both kinds are still valid. You remember Paul said, What is it then? I will pray with the Spirit, and I will pray with the understanding also. I will sing with the Spirit, and I will sing with the understanding also. So prayer is a necessary part of leadership of our walk. So don't forget to pray. You know, often folks come to me or they call me with needs, and we talk. But I always remember to pray. Those who are carrying out their calling and doing their part in the body, in their ministry, we are in the God business. So don't forget to pray. Set aside time to pray. And then remember, it's a two-way conversation. So Jesus, rising up a great while before day, he went out and departed into a solitary place, and there prayed. And Simon and they that were with him followed after him. And when they found him, they said unto him, All men seek for thee. And he said unto them, Let's go to the next town, that I may preach there also. So this is the Galilean itinerary. For therefore came I forth. And when it was day, he departed and went into a desert place. And the people sought him, and came to him, and stayed him, that he should not depart from them. And he said to them, I must preach the kingdom of God to other cities also, for therefore am I sent. So, next event 4.10, preaching in the Galilean synagogues, is Matthew 4:23. This is like a summary statement. Matthew 4:23. And Jesus went about all Galilee, teaching in their synagogues, and preaching the gospel of the kingdom, and healing all manner of sickness and all manner of disease among the people. And his fame went throughout all Syria, and they brought unto him all the sick people that were taken with diverse diseases and torments, those which were possessed with devils, and those which were lunatic, and those that had the palsy, and he healed them. And there followed him great multitudes of people from Galilee and from Decapolis, from Jerusalem, from Judea, and from beyond Jordan. Every need, all manner of sickness, all manner of disease. Don't let anything stop you. Well, how do you get to that place in your faith? Well, just demand it. Never give in and never give up. Just like Abraham, even if you make mistakes, just get back up and keep believing. That's why he's the father of all who believe. He never gave in and he never gave up. He just kept asking and kept seeking and kept knocking till he knocked the door down. So here's another verse that goes with this, Mark 1:39. And he preached in their synagogues throughout all Galilee and cast out devils. And then Luke 4:44, all it says is he preached in the synagogues of Galilee. So we just have a couple more events to finish for tonight. The next one is event 4.11. Let down your nets, plural. So Jesus was now attracting multitudes. His fame had gone all over the place. And so folks with needs were flocking to him. Luke 5, verse 1. Luke 5, verse 1. And it came to pass that as the people pressed upon him to hear the word of God, he stood by the lake of Gennesaret. That's another name for Galilee. So they were going to push him into the water. And so he saw two ships standing by the lake, but the fishermen were going out of them. They were washing their nets. And so he entered into one of the ships, which was Simon's, and prayed him that he would thrust out a little from the land. And he sat down and taught the people out of the ship. See, apparently Peter and the other fishermen whom Jesus had already invited to follow him, they were still fishing from time to time. They hadn't made the full transition into fully joining Jesus' entourage. So Luke 5 verse 4. Now when he had left speaking, he said to Simon, launch out into the deep and let down your nets for a draught. It's payback time. You know, when you do God's work, it's payback time. Have you collected your paycheck? So Jesus said, let down your nets for a draught. Well, during payback time, God will give you clues to get what he wants to give you if you obey what he says. And Jesus said, let down your nets. Verse 5, and Simon answering and said, and Master, preacher man, I'm the fisherman, you're the preacher man. And we've toiled all the night, and we haven't taken anything. Do you know what you're doing? Do you know what you're talking about? But all right. Nevertheless, at your word, I will let down the net. Well, wait a minute. That's not what Jesus said. He said, let down your nets, plural. Peter said, all right, preacher man, we'll accommodate you. We'll let down a net. And verse 6, when they had this done, they enclosed a great multitude of fish, and their net broke. And they beckoned to their partners that were in the other ship that they should come and help. And they came and filled both ships so that they began to sink. And when Peter saw that, he fell down at Jesus' knees, saying, depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord. He realized what he had done. These were seasoned fishermen. They'd seen it all, but they'd never seen it like this. Wow. And so, verse 10, it was also James and John, the sons of Zebedee, which were partners with Simon. And Jesus said to Simon, fear not, from henceforth you shall catch men. And when they brought their ships to land, they forsook all and followed him. This was the final straw that convinced Peter, and now he was committed. Next event 4.12, is the Sermon on the Mount. We have arrived at the Mount. The next event is Jesus' greatest teaching, the Sermon on the Mount. For many of the incidents in the Bible, we actually don't have most of the words Jesus actually spoke. We only have short quotes or summaries. John the Apostle said if we had all his words, the books would fill the world. But I believe that we do have the words that Jesus spoke in the Sermon on the Mount. That actually was his lesson plan for his apostolic ministry. All the things that Jesus opened in this teaching were dealt with later in his ministry. This was the new light that generation needed to hear. And it literally was Jesus' manifesto. And we're going to spend a lot of time in this teaching. For in it are the seeds of Christianity. But we've seen there's two perspectives. Not only what does it mean to us now, but what did it mean to them back then? For it indeed was the zenith of Judaism. So, next week, we're going to start, same time, same station, with a new episode of Tune In Tuesday. We'll see you next week. Bless you.